Welcome back to Project Hoonigrom, the little Honda Grom or MSX125 with a KTM EXC300 two-stroke shoehorned into it. The last time you saw the bike, we took it over to a go-kart track in Croydon and it was wild. And I'm also pleased to report that 999 Laser, a massive YouTube channel, featured the bike. Throughout that whole build and video though, one thing that had been bugging me was the engine cases. So today, we're going to restore them. For those of you that are new to the channel, as I briefly mentioned in the intro, I came up with a crazy idea to turn the Grom from a 10 horsepower bike to a 50 horsepower bike, and yeah, it's pretty wild. So if you want to see more, make sure you check the videos at the end. But in this episode, we're going to show you how to do a DIY restoration on your cases at home. Now, yes, these aren't going to be perfect. I haven't got a sandblaster, but for the sake of £10 and a few hours of your time, you're going to completely transform how your engine looks, especially like this with the enduro and dirt bikes where they get a lot of rubbing on the cases from the brake lever and the gear shifter. The next couple of steps are going to vary massively from bike to bike. Now with mine, because it's got the EXC300 engine in there and a completely custom exhaust, which is absolutely beautiful from Mark Dent at Performance Fabrications, we are going to have to strip some things out of the way, which include the side fairing. So in this section, it's just going to be stripping the Grom down, getting it ready to work on. I have chaptered the video, so if you want to get straight to the painting part on how to do it, that'll allow you to skip to the relevant section. With full access to the covers and the power valve caps, the first job is draining the gearbox oil. So on the two-stroke here, we just have the gearbox oil. There's obviously not an engine oil. I would strongly recommend doing this and removing the cases, because I've seen people paint cases on a bikes before and it looks absolutely awful. But like I say, you are going to need to drain the oil really, unless you lay the bike on the side. Not again something I'd recommend. So here, because I needed to do a gearbox oil change anyway, it was the perfect time to drop that oil. Thankfully, the engine in the Grom wasn't terribly filthy, but what I would say is many enduro and off-road bikes will have crud absolutely everywhere. So using some brake and clutch cleaner and a little brush, which is here just an old toothbrush, I can scrub around all the gaps and angles just to make sure we clean any grit out there, because we certainly don't want that getting inside the engine when we remove the cases. On my 1998 KTM EXC300 two-stroke, I have two inspection and adjustment caps on the cylinder head, and because these are magnesium, they've corroded, they don't look fantastic at all, not so much from rubbing like the engine covers, but I want to get them tightened up too, even though I'd really like to get them repaired. But magnesium welding, God knows where you'd even go. But yeah, 3 screws removes each one of those. Using a new Stanley blade, I can then clean off the excess gasket and silicone. I'd really like to order some genuine gaskets for this, but there seems to be so many variations, and with it being a 1998, I'm not even sure which ones I need, because a lot of them look very similar. But if anyone's got any links, please let me know in the comments on where to get some gaskets for a 1998 EXC300 engine. We then need to remove all the screws from the clutch cover. Now on the KTM again, these are an 8mm headed bolt. Mine aren't in fantastic condition, so we're going to go over restoring these as well, but we'll come to that later in the episode. But what will happen is when you do remove that cover, you are going to get a little bit of gearbox oil drip, so it's certainly worth keeping the drip tray in place at this stage. It's then on to working your way around the bike to the other side to remove the generator cover and that other power valve inspection plate. Thankfully this side wasn't too bad on the corrosion. Again, I'm not really sure why the magnesium's failed so badly on that top right one. It's got a lot of pitting, but this side thankfully looks a little bit better. With the covers removed and placed on the workbench, they are ready for operation. Now, if you want to do a real pucker job at this stage, preparation is key. But ultimately, I'm not looking to spend days having these cases sent away. I think with them being magnesium, they're probably not going to be the easiest thing to repair. I just want to make them look a lot better than they do currently. And in order to do that, the first step is to key them up so that the paint's got something to bite to. So I use a Scotch-Brite pad just to make a nice coarse surface that the paint will stick to. It's then time to go outside to my state-of-the-art spray booth. Now, as we mentioned before, preparation is key. Ideally, you want to get a primer down on this to really let the paint bond to the cover. But if I'm being completely honest, as long as you've got a good keyed surface, this paint I've used in the past has been absolutely fantastic, straight down onto the metal. Obviously, do at your own risk. But I will also stress we need to make sure everything is degreased. So again, using the brake and clutch cleaner and a bit of cloth before you put any paint on it, do make sure there is no grease, fingerprints, engine oil, etc. on those, as they will react with the paint. The bolts were not looking fantastic either. They certainly were going to let down those new shiny cases. So essentially I make sure I give them a good scrub up with the Scotch-Brite pad, completely degrease them with a brake and clutch cleaner, and then using a bit of cardboard I push them through. And the reason I do that is I only want the heads to be painted. I don't want any paint on the thread because it could make it a nightmare putting back together and affect all the torque settings when we put the covers back on. Certainly not perfect, but night and day difference from how they looked before. And that's even before we get to the detail of sanding back down the KTM logo. Now, at this point, you could just put them on and leave it alone. But I really like the fact that obviously the Honda didn't come with this KTM out the factory. So it's got a shout about what monster's been put in there. And essentially using a 120 grit wheel on the Dremel, I just very gently go across removing the paint to expose the raw alley, or magnesium, come to think about it. But essentially you could try and paint this, and I'm going to be honest, it probably wouldn't look fantastic, especially with my unsteady hand. So this is a quick cheap method to make it look, well, pretty awesome. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get the power valve gaskets for those covers. So essentially I use a very small amount of silicone just to seal it, stop any oil leaking out there. But as it is just the power valve assembly, it's not under high oil pressure load. But I must say it looks absolutely fantastic, painted with those zinc plated sprayed screws, really finishing that all off. Thankfully, the stator gasket cover all came off in one piece. It didn't actually split apart and tear. I believe this because it wasn't actually very old. The bike was rebuilt a couple of years ago. But again, I should really see if I can track down some gaskets so that if I ever have to take it apart, we can get this all done properly. But I'm confident we're not going to have any leaks. And again, torquing everything back up, it looks absolutely sweet. Back round to the other side, it's time to get the clutch cover on. Again, the gasket on this all came off in one piece because I believe they aren't very old. But if you are going to be doing this job on an old engine, the likelihood those gaskets are going to split and fall apart and you will need a replacement. Again, you can get these normally direct from manufacturer unless it's like my bike where it's like 1998 and really old. I always put something on the gauges or the screen of the bike to show there's no gear oil in there as a reminder to myself, because sometimes I can come back to these projects weeks, if not months later, and the last thing you want to do is go, oh yeah, I think that's done, go for a ride and destroy the motor. But essentially it's a pretty straightforward process of undoing the overflow fill point and then pouring the oil into the cover where we've just painted into the cap. And then eventually it will all drip out of that overfill point. And once it starts dripping out, it's at the right level. But you do need to make sure the bike's level when you do that. Otherwise, you won't get the right amount in there. With the oil level for the gearbox all correct, you can now refit the filler cap and admire the new exhaust springs I've bought. I think they're a nice upgrade with the little rubber sleeves on them. That's a wrap for this episode of Project Hoonigrom. Getting through those little jobs, but the bike really needs to be fully stripped down for paint because I'm super excited to get the panels over to Imageworks to get the Hoonigrom colour scheme finally finished. But I must say the bike is really coming together now. Won't be long till she can start going on some proper road trips, because it's actually working really well. But I do also need to change the gearing because it is incredibly tall. I really want to down gear it just to give it a bit more feistiness through the gearbox, but I also worry it might be a little bit wild, as even with that tall gearing it has no issue picking the front wheel up. Until next time, thanks for watching.